Hey, what's up guys? Note Investor here. Today got a different video. I'm going to be talking about my favorite books on trading. Now, I did a video about a year ago and I posted a blog post on my site regarding the top 5 books for learning technical analysis. Now, while there is more to trading than technical analysis, as many of you know, some of these books are still going to be on my list today, but beyond the technical analysis, I will also be covering some big picture books, some psychology books that I would recommend for newer traders and experienced traders alike. So as always, this list was very hard to narrow down. I mean, there's just so many good books out there. You can get very specific on topics, books on options, books on Forex, but these are just kind of general books. And to be fair, they kind of lean a little bit more stock centric, but they do a very good job covering the disciplines of trading as well as technical analysis and just some of the key things that we need. And so keep that in mind. And of course, I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts. Post some comments. What are some books that you really like or that you would recommend for newer traders, or books that you felt have helped you in the past? So without further ado, let's get to it. So number 1 on my list right now, and this is a big picture view, is The Successful Investor by William ONeil. Now, in my last video, I covered How to Make Money in Stocks by William ONeil from Investor's Business Daily. I would recommend this one just because this is a smaller, thinner, very quick, easy read. And it's a big picture book. It's what I would call kind of a big picture beginner book. Talks about just general stock markets, trends, bear markets, bull markets, cycles. It gets into the basics of technical analysis, as well as some of the specifics that William ONeil and the folks over at IBD use to isolate kind of winning stocks. But the takeaway here for traders is just understanding the market cycles, understanding stop losses, knowing when to get out of the way, and some of those things. If you like this book, then I would recommend deep diving a little bit further and checking out his green book, How to Make Money in Stocks. This is the meaty version. It's a very thick book, tons of charts, but he goes into his entire CanSlim system. And this was one of the earlier books that I really enjoyed from a trading perspective, really started to help me out, get me on the right track. And so I really enjoy this one. I would recommend it for the newer traders and investors alike. Number 2 on the list, The New Trading for a Living by Dr. Alexander Elder. This is a great book that just covers various aspects. The front of the book is a lot about psychology and risk management, something we all need to know, discipline, and then he gets into kind of his technical analysis tools and systems. Again, very stock centric. He is a stock trader, but still very applicable from a risk management perspective, trade management. He has some very specific indicators that he uses, certainly not applicable to all markets, but all around the book is one of my favorites, just a very well written book, very good examples. I would recommend getting it. Get the hard copy. It's in color. The charts look very nice, and it's just a good reference guide that I like to use. So I would definitely recommend checking this one out. Even if you just read the first couple of chapters on psychology and discipline, I think the book alone would be worth it just on those points alone. Number 3 on the list, another William ONeil book, How to Make Money Selling Stocks Short. Now, the reason I like this book is because even if you don't plan on shorting or getting out of the market and capitalizing from that perspective, this book teaches you how to understand when stocks and just markets in general are starting to top out. It's very good about helping you identify sell signals and exit signals, as well as avoiding buying the falling knife, if you will, and trying to guess the lows. And it just teaches you some really good disciplines and examples on how weak stocks generally will become weaker. And this is good for a lot of markets because they tend to ebb and flow along the same psychology. I really enjoy this book, even if you don't plan on shorting, just because it's a good and it's a very thin book on just how to identify those trend changes and when cycles are beginning to top. This was written with Gil Morales, and as an aside, I would highly recommend Gil Morales' books. Trading in the Cockpit with Gil Morales. I mean, he has some really good books that he's written on his own with somebody else, and so I would definitely recommend checking those out as a notable mention. So the next few books are what I would consider the pure technical analysis books, and these are the books I recommended in my last list. I still would recommend them for traders, newer traders, even some experienced traders, just to read through these, to be familiar with the various concepts, the various indicators. So the first one here is The Technical Analysis of Financial Markets by John Murphy. This is a really thick book. It feels a little bit like a textbook, but it's a very easy read. The font's big, and it's just a good kind of overview of the various indicators, the basics of technical analysis. And so if you're newer to technical analysis, or if you want to brush up on it, I would recommend this one as a good read. It's solid all the way through. It's a lot of the essentials, if you will, on the various aspects of technical analysis. And this one's good because he covers different angles. He refers to futures and different aspects, different markets. So it applies well to both currency markets, crypto, stocks. It's just a good all-around technical analysis book. Now, getting very specific, this next one is simply on volume price analysis. As you guys know, I use volume a lot in my charting, and it's very important to understand what the volume is telling you. And so Coulling put this book together. Highly recommend it. Again, another relatively easy read, but it's very eye-opening, and it's just a good read on just the aspects of volume, how they relate to price, and how to interpret what you're seeing in the charts. And so, complete guide to volume price analysis. And next on the list in technical analysis land is Japanese Candlestick Charting Techniques by Steve Nison, really largely responsible for bringing the candlestick techniques to the West, as they will. And this is good just from understanding price action candles. Most of the charts we see nowadays are candlestick charts. A lot of folks still use bar charts, but for the most part, it's become very commonplace to see candlesticks. And it's good to understand the various candlestick reversal patterns. And so I highly recommend this from that perspective, but it's important to keep in mind that candlesticks are not a system all by themselves. Even folks that do primarily price action based trading, where they're not really using other indicators, understand that you don't always just interpret every candlestick in isolation. It's always done in context, and even Steve Nison himself will mention that several times throughout the book, and even done in context with other indicators and traditional chart patterns. But it's still a good guide to understand what are the various candlesticks, especially the real popular ones, because like many things in technical analysis, the more people that see it and the more people that anticipate those moves, very often they play out as expected, because it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If more and more traders are seeing the same thing, generally they will tend to act in the same response, in the same direction. So this is a good reference guide, a relatively easy read too on technical analysis using candlestick charting. And last but not least in the technical analysis book is the Encyclopedia of Chart Patterns, and that is what this book is. It truly is an encyclopedia. It's 900 pages long, something like that. It's a huge book, a little on the pricey side, runs about $80 for the hardcover, but it is a book I have readily available. I like to use it as a reference. It's a little bit more stock centric, so a lot of the statistical information is based on stocks, but the patterns are good. He goes into very good detail explaining why the patterns are formed, the psychology around it, how to trade it, the various examples, good examples, bad examples, all that good stuff. And he covers just about any chart pattern that you can think of. I generally will stick to some of the major type of chart patterns, but this book really deep dives into the various types of patterns. And so it's not a book you necessarily will just sit and read end to end, but it's a book you can nibble on from time to time. Or if you think you're seeing a pattern in a chart and you want to learn a little bit more about that specific pattern, this is a great book to go into. Each of the chapters are relatively short, just because there's so many different patterns covered in this book, and it's just a good reference guide to really nailing down the specifics and what goes into each individual chart pattern. Next up, we have a few psychology and risk management type of books. First on the list is Market Wizards. This is a great book. Now, there is a Market Wizards series. He gets into some of the other ones here, but I would recommend the first one. And in this specific example, I would recommend getting the audiobook. It's a good book because it's just a bunch of different interviews, and so it's a good book to listen to little by little. I tend to put it on when, kind of doing a little bit low mental activity stuff, hiking, on a long drive, that sort of thing. And the reason I really enjoyed this book is because he interviews some of the greatest traders ever across various markets, whether it's bond markets, currency markets, stocks, I mean, you name it, he covers it. But what I really enjoyed about the book is just how normal and how human so many of these traders are. I mean, many of these top traders had come from very tough beginnings in terms of their trading careers. They blew up multiple accounts. They were at their wits' end many a times, and it's just so many good examples of very relatable psychological dealings when it comes to trading. They also do a good job about explaining their risk management strategies and techniques, and I really enjoyed that aspect. So from a risk management and a psychology perspective, kind of the nuts and bolts of trading, this is a good book. Of course, some of the actual terminology are a little bit dated just because he's interviewing folks that were trading in the 70s and the 80s, but the disciplines and the value that they provide from some of their experiences are still just as applicable today. And I just recently listened to this one again here just a couple of months ago, and it's just so applicable and so true even today, all these years later. So one I definitely recommend, especially from the audiobook perspective. In the psychology section, Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas. One of my mentors said, you should not even be trading unless you have read this book at least once. And I really agree. This book just tackles a lot of these psychological challenges with trading. Mark Douglas wrote The Disciplined Trader. This one is another one I would recommend getting on audio. You can speed it up a little bit, listen to it a little bit faster, and get through it pretty quickly from an audio perspective. And I've gone through this book several times over. Just a good reminder of the trading psychology aspects and some of the disciplines and some of the reasons we often will self-sabotage our own trading and our outlook on trading, some of the expectations and all that. So one I would definitely put on the list, especially if you were a newer trader. And along those same lines, The Psychology of Trading by Brett Steenbarger, one of the top psychologists when it comes to trading. He has several other books. This one's probably all around my favorite one. Again, not an easy read, but just very good, especially if you've already been trading. A lot of this will make a lot more sense if you have already had some experience trading and have a little bit of feel for some of the challenges, some of your own personal trading styles. And these books just really are enlightening in so many ways. And so some of these psychology books aren't really the sexy topic when it comes to trading. Everybody always wants to look at the charts and the latest indicators and strategies, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. When it comes to the psychology, we are often our own worst enemies in trading, and this book just reveals so much about ourselves and really challenges your thinking. So between Mark Douglas and Brett Steenbarger, I would also recommend some of the Van Tharp books, although his are a little tougher to get through in my opinion. And like many of these folks, Van Tharp does a lot of selling in his book for his seminars and all that stuff. Now, he's very good. He's also featured in Market Wizards, but he's got some good books that I would check out as well. So you can see very quickly, top 10 books I would recommend checking out. Some of them are good reference books. Some of them are books you want to listen to in audio, and other books are easy to read, kind of get through relatively quickly. And learning is just something you never stop doing when you're trading. It's just you always want to come back to some of these books. You want to pick up some new ones. And I generally will go through at least a couple of books a month, whether it's on audio or the hardcover books, just to stay fresh. I would read some other ones. There are so many that I would recommend as well. It's really hard to narrow down the list. Some notable mentions: Reminiscences of a Stock Operator is very often on these books. I would also recommend How to Trade in Stocks, Jesse Livermore. They're both kind of along the same lines. They're pretty good books. You can also get those on audio. Trade Your Way to Financial Freedom is a Van Tharp book. Pretty good book there. We covered chart patterns. Alexander Elder's book there. The Michael Lewis books are good, but they're not necessarily trader books in terms of discipline. They're just good books about the market in general. One I almost put on the list but decided not to just because it's a little bit more specific is One Good Trade by Mike Bellafiore from S&B Capital. I love his stuff. Good book, but this is very stock centric, and it's written about proprietary trading, and so it's really just geared toward a very niche market, the intraday stock trader. The book is just really good in terms of the disciplines and some of the work that requires to be successful. He does, of course, a lot of selling of his firm, so you can probably skip some of the chapters on how to interview for a prop firm and all that stuff, but still one of my favorite books right now. Get it on audio. It's a good book. He's got another one, The Playbook, that I would also recommend. And the list can go on and on and on, as you guys can imagine. So there is no end, but these are just some of the top books that I would recommend for those learning to trade, those relatively newer. And they're very specific to just trading in general. They're not specific to crypto, or they're not specific to stock options or anything like that. But there are some good classics that should be looked at if you're looking to build a little bit of a trading library. So I hope this helped, guys. Let me know what other books you think that should be included on the list, other books that you have read that you like. I'm always looking to check out some new books. Thanks for watching. Till next time, take care, guys.